My name is Stephanie Lucas. I am the founder and CEO of The Annuity Consultants. I want to thank you all for joining us today. I'm very excited to have you and to have Aaron Houghton with us today. So a little bit of background on the Heart-Centered Planning series. Heart-Centered Planning is really about connecting with your clients on a soul level and really bringing unbiased recommendations and listening to their needs and desires. And it is really taking your business to the next level, and rather than it being a job, it's really your calling. And so through the guides that we've put out and through the webinars, these are different things that we talk about how to take yourself and your business to the next level. A couple of housekeeping tips before we get started. We are going to answer questions as we go through. The webinar total will last about an hour, and as we get questions, Allison will hand them over to me and we will interject into the conversation what questions the audience has, so keep them coming. I'm sure that you'll have plenty of them for Aaron, so we really encourage the audience to communicate with us throughout. And then, of course, the questions you're going to put in the drop box that says questions on the right-hand side of your screen. You can make them viewable to everybody or make them private. Either way, we would love to hear from you. So, again, like I said, we've got Aaron Houghton here with us today. I'm going to read a little bio about Aaron real quick. So, Aaron started his first business at 17, and he's built and launched more than 11 tech startups since, scaling one from concept to 350 employees and 50 million in annual revenue. He sold 2 companies to private buyers and one to a publicly traded company for 169 million before his 30th birthday. That's pretty impressive. He was selected as the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year in 2008 and was listed in Inc. magazine's 30 Under 30 in 2010. He's shared his story with hundreds of audiences, including Harvard University, entrepreneur organizations, and Startup Nation. Looking back, Aaron can see his success came with the hidden cost of long-term stress, including panic attacks, anxiety, a cancer diagnosis in 2009, and he had a habit, like many of us, of pushing himself to the absolute limit. He knew there must be a better way. He spent 5 years studying how entrepreneurs manage stress and personally tested techniques for achieving high performance while maintaining mental and physical health. He created the Founders First System, a program designed to improve the experience of founders and business leaders around the world, inspired by his own personal experience. So welcome, Aaron. That's quite an impressive.
Thank you so much.
Yes, I am so excited to have this conversation. So today we're actually talking about building community, but what does that really mean? And so in every guide, we've kind of just defined what the concept or idea means to us. And so a community is a group of people with shared values or interests who work together towards a common purpose or to achieve a common goal, whether they are connected virtually or geographically. A community comes together to support each other. They care for each other and hold each other accountable. So this reminds me actually of a painting that I have hanging in my house. It represents John Trudell, who is an activist, a Native American author, poet, speaker, recording artist. And there's a quote that's written on there. It says, "Every human being is a raindrop, and when enough of these raindrops become clear and coherent, they become the power of a storm." So that to me is more important than ever, and now more than ever, community is so important in my opinion. So, yeah. So with that, let's go ahead and dive into the questions. So the first question I've got for you is, we're talking about building community today, but we don't often pause to think about what community really means. So in your own words, how do you define community?
Well, Stephanie, thanks so much for having me. And this has been a really big part of my last kind of 1 to 2 years in my personal and professional life, trying to kind of build community around myself, because honestly, in a lot of ways as an entrepreneur, I felt lonely. I had my clients, I had my business partners, I had investors, I had all these people around me, even my wife and family and my parents. And But sometimes I felt like I couldn't talk to any of those people about what was real in my life. And so I think for me, community is about admitting finally in my life that life is better when we're not alone,
Yes.
and that having this shared experience with other people can be really powerful. And I kind of looked back in my life as evaluating some of my early professional years and kind of wondering why I felt like I suffered personally so much. I look back on my kind of developmental years as a kid, and I grew up in a great family, and I was involved in a church youth group. I played basketball and soccer, and I was on these teams. I was in Boy Scouts, and we did a lot of adventures out in the woods and out in nature. And so I had these teams that I was around all the time, that there wasn't exactly pressure to perform every single day. It was much more about the camaraderie and about living something together with other people. And then I found myself in the professional world, and I started wondering, where's the real team of people that I feel like look like me, that identify with these same types of problems as an entrepreneur? And that's why I started thinking about building communities.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and I feel like a lot of times in the corporate world, people are kind of pitted against each other. So then when you do start building something, you just feel like you have to do it on your own. And we don't have to do it that way, you know?
Yeah.
Old ways of doing things.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah.
And I think there's a lot of models out there in the corporate world that just intentionally put people against each other, right, to see who wins, and the top people rise to the top. But then if that's your peer group, right, then you've just got a bunch of wolves attacking you all the time versus maybe what you want instead is the experience. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, and that's big in my industry, in the financial services and insurance services space. That's how people come into the business. It's like whoever does the most sales, and they'll be on the leaderboards, and they'll be the top producers, and they get all the awards. And I'm trying to change the industry from the inside out by really helping people understand that we don't have to do it that way, that we can really collaborate and co-create and do really great work, and everybody be successful,
Yeah, incredible.
So,
Yeah, huge mission.
yes, thank you. Okay, so why is community so important both personally and professionally? You kind of touched on it in the last answer, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, what I want to share kind of around this is like it's native to kind of who we are as people, and it's built into what we need as humans and how our brains have developed. The brain chemical serotonin is around feeling loved and feeling connected, and it kind of came out of our tribal past as humans that work together in tribes of 50 people or less. And I think one of the things that's really interesting about serotonin is that you actually have to have available serotonin in your brain to produce melatonin in order to get the sleep effect that we need in order to fall asleep in the evenings. And if you think back over the past, why we needed community around us is that it wasn't safe to fall asleep if there was some sort of risk, or if you didn't have your tribe of people around you keeping you safe in the evening. You had to make sure you had your team. People were set up as watches. You could lay on the ground and fall asleep, and you'd be safe to make it through the night. And the humans that didn't have that sort of wiring internally, fell asleep anyway and got eaten by something because they weren't in a safe place. So there's so much of this still left in us today. And I think it's both around feeling safe so that we can make the right decisions. The tactical piece of just like actually getting good sleep can actually be affected by this if we don't feel safe and we don't feel like we have our people in our tribe and our team. But then I think the other thing that's so incredible, if we think about on the professional side, is that community is just like any other type of team. It's people working together toward a shared mission with similar goals and values. And that's incredible. Going back to your quote at the beginning of our session here about raindrops coming together to form a storm. When we're all moving in the same direction, we can create something that looks really big and is really big and can have a huge impact.
Well, and that's what we're doing, with what you're building and what I'm building. It's like we've got a common cause. And yeah, so we're bringing so much goodness to the world. Yeah, talking about that too, the tribal way of living and being protected by other humans. It's like now our alarm systems do that. And so like, why do we need other people? Well, there's a lot of reasons that we need other people. Even though technology has enhanced our lives, it doesn't mean that, we have to disconnect from others. So, and being in service of others is so incredibly important to our well-being. So, yeah. We talk about this also in the guide that goes along with this webinar, which we'll be sending out to everybody if they haven't read it. So yeah, I love that you touched on that. So tell us about your shift. I know you struggled with some health issues and chronic stress related to your fast-paced lifestyle. What was your breaking point, and when did you really know you had to make a change?
It's interesting because when people hear the summary of kind of my 20s and 30s as an entrepreneur, building a lot of companies and having a lot of success, and then you hear the part of a cancer diagnosis in 2009 when I was 27 years old, I'm sure that stands out to some people as like, wow, that's kind of interesting. That obviously must have been this person's wake-up call. I mean, what a scary thing to, have a doctor put a percentage survival rate over the next 5 years in front of you when you're 27 years old. What's really interesting about that is that around that time, I was so focused on my business, and I kept getting this feedback that everything I was doing was right because I was becoming more successful. My business was making more money. We were winning all these awards. Some of those you rattled off in the introduction, which are still just, you almost feel like they were dreams to be involved in these things. But it reinforced a lot of my bad habits in the time and not taking care of myself and just pushing and pushing. I dropped most of my hobbies, and I stopped playing basketball. I stopped mountain biking. I stopped skiing. I stopped doing all the things that I love outdoors and hiking and running and jogging, and I literally just worked, and that's all I did. It was me and my co-founder in the early days, and we saw each other 20 hours a day, and he slept in the office sometimes, and then we continued to build our team around us, and those were the only people that we saw. And then in 2009 was actually one of our most successful years in the business. We grew revenue from about $13 million to $27 million over those 12 months. And the global economy had collapsed in 2008 and 2009, yet we had just been very lucky to raise capital right before that. And so we had a ton of capital on the books, and we were able to keep doing marketing in a moment when nobody else could. So now we're acquiring customers at an absolutely rapid clip. And something I'd experienced through this whole time as the company's growing and growing, and my bad habits of not sleeping well, and having a couple of extra beers at the entrepreneurial networking event that evening, and just pushing myself and assuming that, the 6 hours of sleep I got at the most was what would restore me back to full performance the next day. I started feeling a lot of anxiety. I started feeling it specifically. I'd be just like sitting at my desk during the day, and my heart would start racing. And, as a kid in his 20s, I'm like, well, that's kind of weird. Like, did I have too much caffeine? I actually didn't drink caffeine at all, so that wasn't it. I'm like, what's going on here? Like, maybe I'm dehydrated. I'll drink a little more water, and then it would pick up from time to time. And then it started doing it in really unopportune times, like in the middle of a presentation, or trying to explain my company vision to my team, or being with my board of directors and my investors. And then boom, there it would come up again. And I go, whoa, what is that? And then when I worried about it more, it became worse. And
Yes.
it eventually manifests itself into, in those days, a couple of panic attacks that pulled me out of the office for hours and days while I tried to figure out what was going on. I actually didn't know what a panic attack was. And it was basically just that cycle of anxiety. Heart rate picks up. I worry about it. Heart rate picks up even more. My body starts to get tense. Next thing I know, I'm wondering if I'm going to have a heart attack, and I'm in my 20s and in pretty decent health, despite the fact that I wasn't taking good care of myself in the moment. I was just lucky because I was young. And my big wake-up call, to answer your question, comes in 2012, actually, after I sold the business. Again, these kind of patterns and habits that were popping up in me that I didn't really like, I wasn't really willing to do anything about it to change it. After my cancer diagnosis and surgery and months of radiation, I came back to work again, and I just started working my tail off because that's the only thing I knew how to do. So when I sold in 2012, I found myself just struggling with anxiety and depression in a way that I never had. Well, not that I never had before, in a way that I expected would go away when I sold my business.
Right.
And here I am left without my business. I have more money and time than I've ever had. And now I'm sitting here in this moment going, oh my gosh, I'm actually stuck with these patterns and behaviors that I built. They're in me. I didn't get to sell those. What am I going to do with the next 10 years of my life, the next 20 years of my life?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think a lot of people can really relate to that. I mean, I know I can. I had a fun time for a stint with panic attacks, and it was one of those things where I had to change my diet. I had to, start meditating more and pulling myself away from my work and really focusing on myself, because it was like debilitating. It was difficult. I had moments where I would be on a call or in a meeting. I even was sitting with a very big producer at one point that granted me a face-to-face meeting, which he doesn't do with people in my position, right? He let me know that. And as soon as I sat down, I started having a panic attack, and I asked his assistant to get me water because I was just like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. And I'm like sitting here, I can't freak out in front of this guy, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So in silence, as I tried to continue my meeting with him, which, you know, by the time I ended, my attack was over, but it was like so uncomfortable. And so, yeah, I can totally understand that, you know, happening.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things you just said there, I think is really interesting. I want to highlight was that it was debilitating, and that's what mine became. Like in the beginning, they weren't. It was like, oh, that's a little weird. What's that? And then when I didn't serve it by taking better care of myself, then it basically popped up and got the attention it needed. It said like, I
Yeah,
don't care if you ignore me. I'm going to take you down. And that productivity, I think, is what I've gotten really obsessed with trying to think about the last 5 years, and my journey for the rest of my life is to try and teach entrepreneurs that this isn't
yeah,
necessarily about just like feeling better, or we're not tough enough to handle the stress or something like that. No, this is like actually about how to get our minds and our bodies in a high performance place where we can make really good decisions and we can impress that producer in that meeting and say the things that we need to say in the moment, right? And when we're in those elevated states, it is debilitating, and it reduces our productivity, and it's been scientifically proven to reduce our creativity massively. So if you're trying to solve a big problem in your business and we're freaking out, as we often do as entrepreneurs, or we're just really excited and elevated, we're probably going to make a bad decision, and that's going to not serve us in the long run.
yeah. Yeah, and with that too, I mean, it made me to where I didn't want to go out and network with people. I didn't want to go and take
Yeah.
meetings. You know, I didn't want to schedule calls. I was afraid that it was going to happen, you know,
Yep. Yep.
and it got to the point where I actually went to the emergency room,
Yeah.
and
Any of us
you know,
do.
yeah, and they ran all the tests, and they're like,
Yep.
there's nothing wrong with you. Here's some Xanax.
Yeah.
And no, like that's not how I'm going to live my life.
Yeah.
So I realized that there had to be a better way, and then that's where, you know, I started researching and finding ways to, you know, for my body to eat properly and to do things right, where I wouldn't have those issues. So
That's
thankfully,
incredible. Yeah. I'd say that about probably from my experience, just kind of anecdotally speaking with entrepreneurs, it's probably about 30 to 40% of us end up in the ER for something related to stress.
yeah,
Because we think we're having a heart attack, or there's thoughts of self-harm when people get into the depressive side, and there's a lot of reasons why we end up there, and it can be a really scary place. And one of the things I love to hear, like even you saying that the folks in the ER said it's probably anxiety related because they gave you Xanax, they would have thought of that. So many of my experiences, they were just like, you're healthy, get out of here, right? It was like there was no, occasionally they might say like, are you under a bit of stress? And I'm like, well, I'm a startup founder. Like I live in stress all the time. Of course I am. What kind of
right,
stupid question is that? Thanks for nothing and not understanding me, right? But I love to hear that in some cases now people are actually being told like, there's this thing called anxiety and it can happen related to stress. And like, here are a couple potential paths forward to get
yeah,
people started on that journey. I almost want to build like a little pamphlet for the ER folks. Like, are they an
right,
entrepreneur? Great. Suggest these 5 things. Yeah.
right. Well, and one thing too, though, is that they threw medicine at me, you know,
Yep.
and it's like, that's a Band-Aid.
Yep.
When I did my own research and found like some of the foods I was eating was actually impacting me negatively,
Mhm.
you know, some of the things that I was doing was impacting me negatively. So I found a way that worked for me to, you know, not have to take medication. I
Mhm.
didn't want to have to do that, you
Yeah.
know. Unfortunately, some people can't do that, but you know,
Yeah. Well, the
I,
analogy I like the most around it, I heard this from a psychiatrist once. So it came from somebody who believes in that philosophy, but that the kind of statement was, you don't teach people to sail a sailboat in the raging oceans. You teach them to sail a sailboat in the calm water of the marina. And that's the place for pharmaceuticals in a lot of cases for folks that have mental health issues. Is it calms the big waves in the ocean so we can learn to sail in the calm harbor, and then eventually when we get good at it, we can point out and we can go into the big waves again. And so we might not necessarily need them forever. Dr. Freeman at the University of California, San Francisco is one of the big researchers in the space, 30 years of experience studying entrepreneurs. And he told us recently that he thinks between 38%, and he is a psychiatrist again, so it's coming from that angle, but that 38% to 48% based on a wide range of studies of entrepreneurs should be on at least one prescription medication for a mental health disorder. So if
wow.
you are, or if you feel like you might want to try it as an entrepreneur, you are in very good company because there are so many of us that have found that as a path forward.
Well, that's good information to have. I know that a lot of the stuff that you put out there too is science fact, which I really appreciate. So these are good facts to hear.
Thank you. We try. Yeah, we try because I'm an entrepreneur, not a scientist. So we try and collect all this stuff and figure out
Yeah.
what's going to work for us. Yeah.
Let's see. The next one. Okay, so the pandemic has shifted the way many of us build our networks and connect with our communities. So do you have some quick tips for attendees on how to grow or maintain their communities during these challenging times?
Yeah, I've got a really practical learning that we've had over the last couple months in our own community that I hope people will try, because we've seen some really good results with this, which is that um, in this kind of non-in-person world, the value of some of the things that used to be really valuable in the digital world, we feel like are falling a little bit right now. So putting out really good content is great, and it's definitely like everybody should be doing it.
Yeah.
We're all inundated with great content on the web right now because we can't get great content in person. So everything that was in person before is being pushed through the web. So it's great to do, but it's really hard to differentiate ourselves with great content right now because there's a fire hose of content coming at everybody. And then, so we think like the real opportunity is in kind of live events, like what we're doing right here with a live audience, where it feels a little bit like what we're used to in real life because it's live and we're interacting and we can ask questions with each other. Of each other. And then the third thing that we've found that's really working really well is just almost not even having content, but sometimes more being a curator of conversations between people. And we put people in our community together under the entire premise of like, come meet other people in the community. And then we do facilitate a topic around it, but the value proposition for them is really just getting to talk and meet like 4 or 5 other human beings because people don't get to do that right now. And it's a really weird time where, like, if we've met somebody new over the last year, we met them over email and maybe we had a Zoom call, but we probably haven't seen them in person. My own team, my own core team at Founders First, Dan, Ian, and I, we started this company in March of 2020. We have only met in real life once because of the pandemic. So we're all craving that type of connection with each other right now. And so simply offering being a conduit for connecting to other people and doing it even in a live way over GoToMeeting or a Zoom call has been something that we've seen really, really a lot of demand for in the community space.
Yeah, I have too. And I've done something where, like, I've been connecting with people on LinkedIn specifically that they are in my industry, and they're, when they get my message, they're like, well, what's the agenda? Like, what do you want to talk about? And I'm like, I just want to get to know you, what you're doing, share with you what I'm doing. And, maybe we're like-minded, maybe we'll do business, maybe we won't. Like, I just want to hear about it, and I actually connected with somebody in the financial services space in Switzerland and had a Zoom call with her last week. And it was really awesome just connecting with somebody who's in this space, but in a different country, to like hear what they're doing. And, just, I have no agenda. I'm not trying to do business. I just want to talk,
Yeah, and people are so much more open to that right now than ever before, right? Because like we're not going out and having those like 5 coffee dates a week where we would meet somebody new in our industry. We're like at 0 on those, right?
Totally. Yeah, and I've had a couple of producers too that I've talked to that, going back to content, they have been putting content out to their clients about health and well-being, which, when do you get that from your insurance agent or your financial advisor? Not very often, right? And so the fact that they're getting very good responses from their clients and having really great conversations, and those conversations are leading to business because they're like, oh wow, you get me, you understand what it's like to be human, right? You're not just trying to pitch me product or trying to do that. So that's awesome. So we did have a question come in from Darlene. Do you feel like the mental health affects your heart health? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. What's really interesting about this is that we know that in most people, blood pressure specifically is reactive to stress. So when we're tense, people say, oh, my blood pressure's through the roof right now because I'm stressed out or something. Like it might actually be. It's not just a saying. And what's interesting about that is that we also know from research that if you have elevated blood pressure primarily related to stress, not other cardiovascular issues, it doesn't make it more likely that you will have high blood pressure later in life or in a time when you don't have stress, right? So it's mostly stress reactive, and then it can go up and it can come back down. And so it like first blush, you might say, well, that's great news, right? It's temporary, it goes away. But the other thing that we know scientifically, and studies have shown this, is that the damage to our cardiovascular system, to like the valves and pumps across our body, are actually, they're actually damaged in the moment when the blood pressure is high, and that damage stays with us, and it can try and repair itself in some ways over time. But we do still endure physiologically the impact of that high blood pressure, because in the moment when we have it, it's not great for us either. So there are some actual lifelong impacts that come out of every moment that we live in that high stress position. Again, it doesn't mean that we will have blood pressure when we're 60 years old or when we're 90 years old issues, but it means that we are doing some sort of damage. We're actually kind of aging our bodies in a way that might be faster than we would be doing it otherwise. So that is about as scientific as I can give you an answer to anything, again, based in the studies that we followed. And one of the things we do recommend to entrepreneurs who feel this or want to understand this is testing two things about their physiology. And one of them is blood pressure. You can buy from iHealth, very cost-effective little blood pressure cuff for like $40 that you can put on your arm, and it syncs to your phone. And if you're curious to see if you're reactive in that way, and there's an actual damage and kind of toll that you're taking on your health, you can have it kind of hiding in your desk drawer, pop it on for 2 minutes and see what your blood pressure is right before that big presentation, or after that really terrible conversation with a team member that didn't go the way you wanted it to go. And the second thing we tell everybody to measure is their cortisol level. And cortisol is a longer, midterm and long-term stress hormone in our bodies. And the norepinephrine and other hormones that we release in moments of real stress and intensity, the adrenaline hormones, they dissipate really, really quickly. But cortisol elevates over time if those other hormones have been elevated on a regular basis. And it's something really easy to test. You can use at-home testing kits like Everlywell that you can get at Walgreens, or you can buy them online. I think they sell them on Amazon right to your house. Prick your finger and you can get the test in the mail a couple days later. And there are standard ranges for cortisol. If they're elevated, you're pushing yourself hard, and there's a physiological toll that your body and your mind are taking because of that elevated state. And so you can use that as those two tools as great ways to think about, did my meditation session lower these things? Did my new practice lower these things? Did hiring a therapist lower them? Whatever it is.
Right. So meditation, you recommend that to keep your blood pressure low?
Yeah. So I wouldn't quite go that far, but yes, I would recommend meditation as a way to get our mind and our body calm. But try it. I mean, if you don't have a blood pressure cuff, try it and measure it before and after meditation and see if it works for you. This stuff is kind of different for everybody. If we're talking fun products, I have to mention one that I personally use, and we're not connected to these companies in any way. These are cool tech gadgets and stuff that we like, but there's a device called Muse, M-U-S-E, and it's literally an EEG device, an electroencephalograph that measures your brainwave states. And it's like 10 years ago, these things were over $1 million and in psychology labs at universities, and now this thing's $350. And you can put it on your head when you meditate, and it can tell you if you're actually getting down into those lower gamma wave states and theta wave states that are indicative of actual relaxation and creativity. So that's one of my fun ones if you like gadgets and devices, and I think that's an incredible one to see what meditation is actually doing inside your body. Muse can tell you.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for that recommendation, because we are advocates here of meditation. So we love that. All right, so let's see. The pandemic has also caused us to experience isolation with working from home and not interacting with others as much. In your opinion, what are some of the negative consequences that result when you're disconnected from others?
I think that that emotional availability and the ability to talk kind of in emotion and understand and read emotion is what's really lost right now. It's something that we can read in a room so much more easily. And in this environment, you have to work so much harder. One of the things that I teach entrepreneurs is around just saying, one, being self-aware and figuring out what our emotions are, and then two, just telling the people on the other side what they are, because it's so hard to read over this camera. Do I look anxious right now? Do I look relaxed? Do I look angry? Do I look frustrated? We can read a little bit of it in the face. Now, if we're out in public and we have face masks on, we can't read anything these days. But over these Zoom calls that we're all on and video calls these days, which are incredible ways to connect, so much of that emotional connectivity is lost. And it's easy to just only have real emotional availability and understanding and emotional intelligence with the people, maybe in our families or our spouses or our pets or whoever we see in person. I like in your article, you said what, dogs, cats, and lizards, right? Yeah, whoever makes up your home in-person community these days, that might be the only people that we have this ability to connect with emotionally. And so we've got to do a little extra work. And I think that means doing a little extra work inwardly to figure out what our emotions are. And then the second piece is being willing to communicate them to other people so that they can actually understand what's the emotion behind the gesture and the statement as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all of that. What about some tips, maybe advice on for people that are feeling disconnected? Anything?
Yeah, I would say find your tribe. It's one of my favorite things to think about, and find your people. And I don't mean that in terms of like, you know, height or size or race or income bracket or any of those things. Find your people in terms of hobbies, what you're
Yeah.
passionate about, what you care about, where you're struggling. Find other people that are struggling in the same way as you and have conversations with them. Really, really incredible thing to think about. There's a new platform that's gotten popular just in the last month. I'm sure people have heard of Clubhouse, where it's kind of like a digital online conference social app that's going on constantly 24/7 on every topic under the world. Like go in something like Clubhouse and see who's talking about the area where you struggle the most. If it's anxiety, go find the anxiety room and see and listen to stories of other people. It's an incredible way to connect. If it's, you know, if it's even something more tactical, like your golf game is struggling, go find the golf room and find people talking about that. Find your tribe. And, you know, the thing that I kind of suggest for folks to get started on that is to, if you can't think of them right off the bat, and honestly, when I was in the peak of building my companies, I forgot who I was as well. I didn't know what I liked to do anymore. I hadn't done it in years. And so this process of just sitting down and thinking of what our hobbies are, just big list, write them down. And then the second piece, think back to when you were happiest in your entire life. Maybe we were happiest in our childhood, or we were happiest in university, or we were happy in our first 2 years of our career, whatever it is, or maybe it's now. But think about what that time was, and think about what your hobbies were. Like, how did you spend your time in that moment that you were happiest in your life? And write down those things as well, and start making a commitment back to scheduling time for those activities, and just see what happens.
That's awesome. I love that. And I do have to share it. Right now, I really am like the happiest that I've ever been. And I think it's because I've had so much time to focus on my, inner work and doing the things that make me feel good and not feel like I have to have this, packed schedule with all of these things to do.
Yeah.
So yeah. And I really do like the fact that people are connecting with their families on an even deeper level right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's cool. And I think that's going to be a really impactful thing for our world. It's going to be longer lasting, that people, they're able to have the time with their kids and their spouses and do the things that they haven't done because they work, 60, 80 hours a week. So, and there's a lot of positive stuff that's happening. It's a weird time, but there's still some real good stuff. So.
Yeah, and families and personal relationships that can make it through this much time together are definitely the bulletproof ones that are going to make it through anything. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so tell us about the community you created, Founders First. What's it all about? And how'd you come up with the idea?
Yeah, the Founders First community is I kind of came up with the idea around this feeling of loneliness, kind of where I started sharing today around, being an entrepreneur. And what I realized is it came down to, a word that I used recently here around emotional availability, that there were just not a lot of people that I could share where I was struggling on the inside as a human being, as an entrepreneur. There were a million places where I could go get leadership skills, where I could go learn how to do marketing, where I could learn how to manage my team better, learn finances, like all the tactical pieces of business. There were so many resources and places to go learn these things and connect with other people that want to improve in those areas. But I found that my own internal challenges were actually limiting me as an entrepreneur the most. My knowledge of marketing and leadership and finance was a working knowledge that was sufficient enough to get me by from day to day. I didn't need to go deep in those categories, but I was being really limited on the side of personal performance, because I was picking and choosing opportunities not based on what I thought would be best for the business or best for me, but instead of what I was afraid of or not afraid of, or thought might trigger anxiety, or thought I wouldn't have the energy for that day. And I started realizing, like, I'm I'm the slow wheel here. The rest of the business is taking off, and I want to build those skills in myself. And so the Founders First community is about two things. One, it's about a place where entrepreneurs can be emotionally available to each other, which sounds really soft, I realize, especially for a lot of us hard charging type A people. But the reality is, to get more performance out of ourselves and have a bigger impact in the world, we actually have to make sure we're showing up as the best version of ourselves every day. And so this is a community. We've got about 750 members. We launched in early 2020, and they're entrepreneurs all over the world, mostly in North America for the most part, but and they're sharing these stories about themselves. Here's where I'm struggling. Here's what I'm worried about. I sold my company and it didn't go away, or I'm afraid to even start a company because I have two friends that are entrepreneurs and I've watched them discuss how painful this is. You know, what is the road ahead going to look like for me? And so that's what this is a safe place for entrepreneurs to talk about these things, because it's not always super comfortable, and it's honestly not always the right decision to share these sorts of challenges with your co-founder or your executive team or your investors or your customers. And sometimes not even your spouse and partners that you're around personally, because you know, maybe you mortgaged the house to double down on the business, and the last thing you want to say is like, I'm not sure I'm the person to actually take it the next year in my current state. I need to work on me. That could freak everybody out, and we have to be these confident leaders standing up and saying, you know, charge to the flag on the horizon, let's go, we've got this. When inside we don't always feel like that. And so that's what our community is about. It's a free community for entrepreneurs, and we have a number of paid memberships on top of it where we teach mental resilience and personal performance tools that help entrepreneurs improve their health so that they can have a bigger impact on the world, so they can stay in the game longer as a business person instead of burning out like so many of us do.
That's amazing. I love the fact that you give everybody a space to be able to kind of break down, you know? It's like everybody needs the ability to be able to do that. Just because you are in charge of making things successful and you have to pay the bills and take care of, you know, all of the things, you have the right to also be vulnerable and also have breakdowns. Like it's okay, you know? Because if you out, then you have anxiety. You know?
One of our members shared that she found Founders First through being in a kind of maybe a connected sort of Zoom call. I think it was a virtual call where she was talking about where she was in her business and broke into tears, and the other person goes, "You need Founders First," which that is kind of what we think of as the situation. We'd love to catch you before that moment as well and help you avoid it, but look, we're all going to have that experience 100 times as an entrepreneur as well. There's no way to avoid some ride through that emotional roller coaster, and that's what we're there for.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I'll admit I had a call yesterday that I cried on. So, but it was somebody who was encouraging me for what I'm doing, and it was so overwhelming that I was just like, oh my God, you see me in this way and what I have the ability to do, and it was just like, it was affirming, but also it was kind of scary. It was like, oh wow, this is a big thing, you know? So it happens to all of us.
I honestly think those full range of emotions are incredible assets to us as entrepreneurs. Like it is great to be excited. It's also great to feel devastated in the moment when something bad happens, and to not kind of compartmentalize that stuff and hold on to it forever, right? Because when we can get it out in the moment, we can move on. And again, even if we don't want to, you know, be all like, you know, soft skills around this and admit that, we could still say, look, for the sake of productivity, all the science proves that when we're holding on to baggage, we're slower, we don't do as good of work, we don't make as good of decisions, we're not as creative, we don't solve problems as well. So even if you're a hard charging type A, this is actually still the right answer for you, Tim.
Absolutely. It is the right answer for everybody. So totally agreed. All right, so we've got a question from Allison. How do you balance personal hobbies with work, and when do you know you're out of balance?
Yeah, I've got a somewhat tactical answer to that, which is that in Founders First, we teach a process of self-evaluation where we measure 5 things about ourselves every day, which are our energy, our level of calm from like a high level of anxiety to the lowest level of calm we achieved, our mood, which is basically trying to stay kind of nice and centered, not super manic, not super down to the depressive side, our identity hours, which is specifically time spent on our identities, hobbies, and activities that are things that we enjoy in the moment, not things that are our professional identity. You know, in our businesses, we struggle so, every day building things, building products, and then we wait for the market to tell us whether they're good or not. We wait for the customers to tell us if they're good or not. Or for an early stage business, we build a pitch deck and we wait till investors tell us it's good or not. And that could be really, really exhausting over time, because we're just waiting on this external confirmation and validation to be judged whether we're good or bad. And sometimes that takes weeks and months. And so what's cool about identity activities, we call them identity hours, is these are presence-driven things where we get a benefit out of them. We don't have to have somebody else judge us, right? So if I go mountain biking here in Colorado for an hour on a beautiful sunny day, even if I'm by myself and not with friends, it always feels good. I just, I revel in the scenery. I just love the feeling of being out in nature and getting exercise. I'm not in a mountain bike race where I have to have somebody tell me whether I got first, second, third, or whether I'm the slowest person out there, right? I'm doing it instead to enjoy it and be in the moment. So that's the fourth factor. And then the fifth factor is happiness. So I very specifically measure these things about myself every single day. We have an app that helps people, our members at Founders First, do this. And then I apply tools when I realize I'm not where I want to be on one of those factors. So Brad Feld shared with me recently in one of our sessions, Brad Feld, famous investor and entrepreneur, that he doesn't believe there's such thing as work-life balance. It's kind of a shock value clickbait statement. So we're like, Brad, what do you mean by that? And he said, he explained, I think really eloquently, that it's not about balance and that there's always the same amount on both sides of the scale and that it's perfectly balanced. It's instead, he gave this beautiful analogy about listening to a bunch of jazz musicians play, where sometimes it falls out of sync and you can hear it as the listener, like, oh, they're not quite in line. And then it falls back in line and the rhythm comes back in together again and it feels great. And you're like, man, they're really killing it. And he said that his experiences as an entrepreneur is much more like that it's about realizing when we're out of sync, and it's about just trying to bring it back into sync again. And there's no if I work 8 hours a day, that I need 8 hours of relaxation a day. There's no prescribed system, but instead the real skill here is an awareness of when we're off, and then an ability to just pull back to center and get on track again. And then, you know what, if we're off the next day again, it's not that big a deal. We'll win in the end if we have that awareness of when we're on or off, and just a muscle that pulls us back to center again.
Yes, love that, love it. All right, so let's see. What has been the most challenging aspect of building and maintaining a solid community in your business and life?
Yeah, I think it's trying to. I think it's the fact that when you build a community, you kind of draw a line in the sand and say, these type of people are in, or these type of people are, this is the type of people we are here, right? This is our mission statement. This is our vision, the things we care about and our values. And as an entrepreneur, I often find myself wanting to be a people pleaser and be everything to everybody, because I don't want anyone to not like me. I don't want anyone to, think that what I'm building isn't perfect for them. We see this in entrepreneurial products all the time, right? Is like, figure out who the product is for and then ignore everybody else, right? Be focused tightly on them. Community is the same thing. And so trying to be really tightly defined about what we are and why we are that, and then honestly policing around that. So if somebody comes into our community and posts something related to, like, I want to build a new pitch deck for my startup, we realize that's probably really relevant to them, and that they need somebody to send them a template. And there's 750 entrepreneurs in this community that probably 80 of them have a template they could send over. But that's not the conversation for our community, because you can learn how to do that somewhere else.
Right.
So helping people come back to what that vision is. Sometimes it's hard to tell somebody, hey, thanks for sharing that. That's not what we do here. Here's what we do here. If you'd like to share like how you feel about going out and raising funding, and how that's either scary or fun or whatever, like, that's what we do here. Please share it, and you'll get 20 people that support you or share their experience, or you'll feel more connected to them. So not being everything to everybody, I think is part of the challenge. And I feel like we've done a pretty good job there. It's been hard. It's been hard to say no to some folks that want to have those conversations, because we would love people in our community, and the more amazing entrepreneurs that we can get, the better. But those conversations are actually really well served in other places, and so we like to be the conduit for finding those places if they find us first and they don't understand what we're about.
Yeah, no, I love that. Like, we've been talking about that throughout this entire series of, when you're looking to work with people, you don't have to work with everybody. Find the people that you want to connect with and build your business and your life around the kind of people that you want to be having conversations with and that you enjoy being around.
Yeah.
So, you don't have to work with everybody. You don't have to be friends with everybody, and you're not going to find something in common with everyone. And that's okay, because there is something out there for everybody. Just go find it.
I remember
So
the first time I heard the concept of firing a customer. It was years ago. And I was like, why would you ever fire a customer? I mean, customers, revenue, lifeblood of the business.
yeah,
And it's around that, right? Some customers don't match your values and don't need what you sell and aren't willing to pay enough, or pay you 20% of your revenue but are 80% of your problem, right? And starting to find that even among a customer segment, which is like a community as well,
yeah,
was really transformational for me as well. That if like for business owners that are listening here, if you've never had that conversation with a client, like that this isn't a match, and they need to go buy from one of your competitors, then you might be too broad, and you might actually have a whole bunch of people that would make your life a lot better if you were dealing with on a
yes.
daily basis.
Yeah, we talked about that in what was it, like the fourth or fifth guide, speaking your truth.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people have a hard time doing that. I've had struggles with that myself. And I have gotten to the point finally in my career after 20 years that I can say no to people. I don't want to work with you because we aren't the right fit.
Yeah.
And it feels good. It's empowering, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I love that. All right, so what does your daily practice look like? For example, what structures do you have in place to make sure that you stay connected to yourself and others?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's really important in this time where like so many of these things that we use to stay connected right now are like digital tools, because they're the things that can connect us when we can't be in person. But for those of us who are able to connect in person and do things like being outdoors, that's the first thing I would point to. And here I'm based in Boulder, Colorado, and everybody for the most part in this community, enjoys the outdoor access that we have here. And so it's relatively easy to find somebody that wants to have a hike meeting, even pre-pandemic, versus a Zoom call or a phone call or even a coffee shop date meeting. So that's one of the first things that I look to here. And then another one is around curating where I get my information from the world. And so I kind of order things now. Like I created this community because it's very valuable to me and this topic's very valuable to me. So I do spend a lot of my time in my own community because it's these conversations that I find really, really valuable. So my own community is honestly where I spend the most time connecting with other people right now, because it's digital and it's available all the time. I do have some other like personal individual groups like on WhatsApp with friends that I connect with. And obviously work teams, and we have all those connections. We have to have partners and clients and all that sort of stuff. But if we're just talking about kind of communities, there's those friend groups that are very individual. And then I found myself really pulling back from the broader communities like Facebook and LinkedIn. I actually deleted them both off my phone about 3 months ago, more as a test than any type of declaration, but just more of I want to see what happens to how my happiness is and what I spend my time doing on my phone. And 90 days later, I still have the habit where I pick up my phone to be entertained, and then I look at it and I go, there's nothing entertaining on this. I guess I got to go do something else. Maybe I'll find another way to connect. And then I find my way back to the communities that I've made easy for me to find, those close friend group of people I really care about, the Founders First community and the people that I really care about there. And then honestly, the people in the same room as me as well, that sometimes it'd be great if I get out of my phone and pay more attention to them as well. So that's been a good reminder for me, is that I've really pulled back from news, and I've pulled back from people that I don't know discussing news, which is basically Facebook and even a little bit of LinkedIn. I use LinkedIn. I use LinkedIn on my laptop now. I still use it. I have to use it for work. I think it's a great platform. And I use it when I'm on, it's in a browser tab on my laptop because it's a work thing. The last thing I need to do is be playing around with connecting with people or responding on my phone in the moment, because it's not that urgent.
Right. I totally agree with that. And, we tried to find you on Facebook so you could help with the sharing of the event. And we're like, he's not here.
Yeah, not very active on that platform. Yeah.
We found Founders First though, so
that's good. Yeah, that's all you need. I do have an Instagram account, but I use it mostly as like a photo gallery of cool stuff I do outdoors.
Yeah.
For my own like personal reference. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been interesting using Instagram for business. I do like it a lot for personal use, but
yeah. I do too. Yeah.
All right, so what is your hope for fellow business owners, entrepreneurs, and people in this industry?
Hmm. I would say that, know the things that make you unique. And to something you said earlier, be vulnerable. Don't be afraid to share those things with the world. And I'm not just talking about your unique gifts. I'm the fastest person who can run 40 yards, or I'm the best marketing person around, or I'm the best connector. But I think also the things that we're challenged with. And I've seen this firsthand over the last half a decade, and that when I share where I'm challenged and where I feel like I'm weak or not good enough, or the areas where I'm struggling right now and want to improve, people just rush to fill in those holes for me. I'm not good at this. Oh, well, I had that same problem once, and here's what I did. I did A, B, and C, and these things worked. Well, C didn't work as well as A, and I get this like absolute wealth of knowledge from people. And I think what's really interesting in today's world, with just so much fast-paced information in the business world, is that it all kind of starts to look the same. And if we can make an emotional connection with somebody, by sharing what's actually really unique about us and what's kind of on the inside sometimes, that emotional connection is going to create a memory where they don't forget about us. And the next 10 people that come to them with the same product or service that we sell are going to sound a little bit boring versus the person that they remember connecting with in an emotional way. Yeah. So that's my hope, that others will be brave in the way that I believe I have. Like, sharing stories about me having panic attacks stuck on the floor as an entrepreneur is like not exactly a marketing message that I would put at the top of my VC pitch deck for my next company, right? But it's actually a message that I've been able to share with the world that's scary to share, that has given me so much more than telling people that I'm a successful entrepreneur and have built companies and made money in the past. And they go, great, get in line. Silicon Valley's full of folks like that. Who cares? Instead, sharing those other parts of my story is what has allowed me to connect with people in a really, really meaningful way. And I wish that experience upon everyone else to be able to feel that as well.
Yes, me too. And I really appreciate that. I appreciate that you're willing to come on here and share that, publicly. We need more people doing that, because we all experience things like this, and it's okay. So, yeah. Well, we are getting down to the end of our time here. So every speaker has a gift for the audience. So I would love for you to share with the attendees what your gift is.
Yeah, I am so excited to be able to share an experience that we have brought really only a handful of entrepreneurs, maybe 40, 50 entrepreneurs through in the last year, that we have offered to make available to this community through Stephanie, which is the Broken to Brilliant. It's a presentation that I do about building better entrepreneurs through mental health science. And what's really, really interesting, so it's a 90-minute interactive workshop. And what's really interesting about this stuff is there's basically no way any of us learn this in school, unless we have maybe like a PhD in psychology and you were in school in the last 5 to 10 years, because the entire field of positive psychology, for example, only started in like the late 90s and early 2000s. Like, this wasn't a thing that you could have studied in 1995 if you went to the top university in the world. And so a lot of this data has only lived in elite military. It's high performance mental health data. It's lived around people like Red Bull athletes and extreme athletes. There's these subcult communities where this information lives, but it hasn't made it to the business world yet. And for the most part, it hasn't made it to mainstream business and capitalism as well. And so it's a 90-minute interactive workshop. I've got a note here. So we've got it scheduled for February 9th at 1 p.m. Central Time for the Annuity Consultants Group. And I'm really, really excited to invite you all to join me. I will be leading it personally, so we'll get to know each other. You'll get to know yourself. You'll get to know other people on the call, and when you'll walk away with some really, really actionable tools to increase your personal performance by living a more healthy life.
That is awesome. I'm super excited to do that with you and with everybody else that has joined us. We will be sending out information in order to get on the 9th at 1 p.m. We'll be sending that out along with a recording of this webinar, as well as the guide that this webinar is linked to. So we really appreciate you, spending the time with us, another hour and a half. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah, for the opportunity to get to know folks and to connect, I'm really excited about it. Yeah, thank you.
So lastly, do you have any concluding thoughts, books, resources, anything that you want to share with the audience before I close up here?
Yeah, I want to give two really tactical things. So as an entrepreneur, I just always like, tell me what to do, tell me what the answers are. So two things that I've discovered over the last year that if you're thinking about building communities or understanding yourself better, I think are absolute game changers. The first one is the software platform that we built our community at Founders First on. It's called Mighty Networks. Just Google Mighty Networks and find it. It's a great platform for building communities on if you're interested in it. There's lots of platforms out there. This is the one that we use and like. And the second one is a book. It's a book called Quiet, and it's about the power of, the subtitle is something like the power of introversion in a world that won't stop talking. And it's about really, whether you're an introvert or not, it's about really discovering what's unique about you on the inside. I am an introvert, so if there's any introverts listening who can relate to this and feel exhausted after these live sessions or all these connecting with people and you need your time to recover, this book was a breakthrough for me to realize that introversion and the concept of quiet are actually really powerful tools that we can use to be more successful and be happier in life. I read it maybe 2 or 3 years ago and it still sticks with me, so I hope someone will enjoy it.
Well, I will definitely check that out because I really truly am an introvert as well, and you wouldn't think that. But it's something that, as a business person, you have to learn to, navigate things and get out there.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and providing such amazing information and content and doing what you're doing in the world. We really appreciate it. I love what you're doing, and I will do everything I can to spread the word about Founders First, and look forward to joining you again on the 9th.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Yeah, so excited to spend time with everybody today. Come see us in the Founders First community. Come join us for the Broken to Brilliant workshop, and keep doing great work, Stephanie. Incredible community here.
Thank you so much. So I want to thank everybody for joining us and taking the time. I hope you guys found this session valuable. Like I said, we'll get an email out to you in the next couple of days with a recording and information about the workshop. And of course, stay tuned for updates on some of the exciting things that we're doing around heart-centered planning and other things we've been working on here at the Annuity Consultants. And if you haven't already followed us on social media at the Annuity Consultants on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter, so you can keep up with what we're doing, I would appreciate it. Thanks again, Aaron. I hope you have a great day.
Thanks, Stephanie.
All right. Bye. Bye, everybody.